The imperial halls of the Zathari Palace stretched endlessly like veins of polished obsidian beneath the 3 moons of Nexus Prime. Each time night fell upon the capital world of the Galactic Confederation, the alien Empress Xalia stood motionless. Before the grand viewport, her 7-foot frame silhouetted against the cosmic ballet of stars and nebulae that painted the void beyond. Her scaled skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that shifted with her emotions currently, a deep indigo of melancholy. Something was wrong with her beloved pet, the royal dragon Vexmar. The beast had been crying every night for weeks, its mournful sounds echoing through the cavernous halls of the imperial residence. Its emerald scales had lost their luster, and it refused to eat the exotic meats that were once its favorite. Despite consulting the finest xenobiologists in 7 star systems, no one could determine what ailed the precious creature. It was as if Vexmar was dying from some invisible malady, of the spirit rather than the body. Xalia sighed, her forearms crossing in a gesture of imperial frustration. Tomorrow the first human diplomatic envoy would arrive, and her attention should be focused on these new potential allies, not on her ailing pet. Yet she could not help but worry. The dragon had been her companion since she had ascended to the throne 3 cycles ago. The Empress turned away from the window, her long ceremonial robes trailing behind her as she made her way to her private chambers. Perhaps a few hours of meditation in her chrysalis would clear her mind. Morning came too quickly. Xalia emerged from her rest chamber to find her attendants already bustling about preparing for the human delegation. The halls had been decorated with symbols of peace and prosperity, according to what little they knew of human customs. The kitchen staff had spent days researching human digestive capabilities to prepare appropriate refreshments. The royal announcer, a small insectoid being named Click, tapped lightly on her door. "The humans have arrived." "My Empress." Xalia nodded and straightened her posture, adopting the regal bearing expected of the ruler of 17,000 worlds. "Send them in." The doors slid open, revealing a group of 5 humans dressed in formal attire. Their delegation was led by an older male with silver hair, but Xalia found her attention drawn to one of the younger females standing slightly behind him. There was something about this human that seemed different from the others. Ambassador Katie Miller stepped forward, the silver-haired man said, introducing the young woman who caught the Empress' attention. "She will be serving as our cultural attaché and will remain on Nexus Prime as part of our permanent mission. If that meets with your approval." The human female bowed respectfully. "It is an honor to meet you, Empress Xalia. I look forward to learning more about your magnificent civilization." Xalia was struck by the sincerity in the human's voice. Most species approached the Zathari with fear or barely concealed greed, but this Katie Miller seemed genuinely curious. Fascinating, she thought. Perhaps these humans would be different from the other races they had encountered in their expansion across the galaxy. Diplomatic meetings proceeded smoothly throughout the day, but as night fell, the familiar mournful cry of Vexmar echoed through the palace. The human delegation exchanged worried glances as the alien sound reverberated through the meeting hall. "Forgive," the disturbance, Xalia said with a slight dip of her crested head. "My royal dragon has been unwell." She explained the situation briefly, expecting the humans to simply nod politely, as most visitors did. Instead, Katie Miller leaned forward with genuine concern. "May I ask how long your dragon has been in distress?" 3 lunar cycles, Xalia replied. Surprised by the question, the human woman seemed to consider this information carefully. "Would it be possible for me to see your dragon?" "Your Majesty, I studied xenozoology before joining the diplomatic corps. I may be able to offer a fresh perspective." Xalia was taken aback. No off-worlders were permitted near the royal dragon. It was both a sacred companion and a security measure, as Vexmar could detect ill intentions and had protected the royal family for generations. Yet something about this human inspired trust. "Very well. Follow me." The Empress led Katie through winding corridors that descended deep beneath the palace to a massive cavern illuminated by bioluminescent fungi. The space was warm and humid, designed to mimic the dragon's natural habitat. On a bed of glowing crystals lay Vexmar, its 40-foot length curled tightly around itself. Its scales, once vibrant green, had dulled to a sickly all of its 6 eyes clouded and weary. Katie approached slowly, her movements measured and respectful. She stopped several feet away from the creature empress. "May I have your permission to move closer?" Zalia nodded, curious about what this human thought she could accomplish where the greatest minds in the Confederation had failed. Katie knelt beside the massive dragon. She did not touch it, but simply observed, studying its breathing patterns, the dilation of its pupils, and the rhythm of its heartbeat, visible through the thinner scales of its neck. After several minutes, she stood and turned to the Empress. "I believe I know what's troubling your dragon, Your Majesty. Vexmar is lonely." Lonely. Zalia repeated the unfamiliar concept. Dragons were solitary, creatures by nature. "Yes," Katie explained. "Based on the environmental data I reviewed before our arrival, your planet recently experienced its equinox cycle, which means the mating season." Zalia realized suddenly Vexmar was of age now and for the first time was experiencing the biological drive to find a mate. But there were no other dragons of its kind on Nexus Prime. The species was exceedingly rare even on their homeworld. Over the next few days, Katie worked closely with the Imperial staff implementing her plan. She requested access to the Confederation's biological database and spent hours researching draconic behavior patterns. When not working on helping Vexmar, she participated in diplomatic meetings, displaying a sharp mind and genuine interest in Zothari culture. Zalia found herself seeking out the human woman's company, drawn to her unique perspective and the ease with which she adapted to alien customs. One evening, as they walked through the Imperial Gardens, Katie explained her theory in full dragons like, "Vexmar are empathic creatures. They form deep bonds with their primary caregiver, but they also need social stimulation from others of their kind. Since there are no other dragons here, we need to simulate that connection." The human plan was both simple and radical, using a combination of pheromone synthesis, holographic projections, and sound frequencies to create an environmental simulation that would make Vexmar feel less alone. It was untested but based on solid xenobiological principles. "It may not cure the loneliness completely," Katie cautioned, "but it should ease the symptoms while we work on a more permanent solution." Zalia was impressed by the human's ingenuity and compassion. Most species viewed dragons as mere beasts or weapons, but Katie understood their sentience and emotional complexity. They implemented the plan the following day. The machinery was installed in Vexmar's cavern, carefully calibrated to the dragon's biological rhythms. That night, the entire palace held its breath, waiting to see if the human solution would work. For the first time in months, silence reigned. No mournful cries echoed through the halls. Zalia rushed to the cavern to find Vexmar peacefully asleep, surrounded by holographic projections of other dragons. The creature's scales had already begun to regain some of their luster. As days passed into weeks, Vexmar continued to improve. The dragon began eating again, and even ventured out of its cavern to bask in the light of the 3 moons. Katie continued to refine the simulation, making adjustments based on the dragon's responses. Her dedication impressed even the most xenophobic members of the Imperial court. Word spread throughout the Confederation. A human had succeeded where the greatest alien minds had failed. The diplomatic implications were enormous. Suddenly, every world wanted human advisors and specialists. Human ingenuity and empathy were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. For Zalia, the implications went beyond politics. For the first time in her long reign, she had found someone who understood what it meant to care for another being, not out of duty or tradition, but out of genuine compassion. She began to seek Katie's counsel on matters beyond Vexmar, extending her stay indefinitely as a special advisor to the throne. Katie, however, was growing concerned. The simulated environment was helping Vexmar, but it was only a temporary solution. The dragon needed real companionship, not just an illusion. She spent late nights in the Imperial archives searching for information about the dragon's homeworld. One evening, as Zalia was reviewing diplomatic correspondences, Katie burst into the throne room, her eyes wide with excitement. "Your Majesty, I found something. The archives mention a small colony of dragons on the outer moon of Zeltar 4. It's a remote system on the edge of Confederation space." Zalia set down her datapad. If there are dragons there, why wasn't I informed? According to these records, the information was classified 300 years ago during the reign of Emperor Voxer. He feared that if others knew of the dragon's existence, they would hunt them for their scales and telepathic organs. The Empress frowned. The politics of her ancestors often prioritized power over the well-being of the creatures under their protection. Can we confirm if this colony still exists? Katie nodded. I cross-referenced with recent astronomical surveys of the sector. There are thermal signatures consistent with draconic biology. The colony appears to be small, perhaps only 15 to 20 individuals, but they're there. Hope bloomed in Zalia's chest for the first time. Since Vexmar had fallen ill, we must send an expedition immediately. Within 2 days, a small research vessel was prepared for the journey to Zeltar. Katie would lead the mission, accompanied by a team of Imperial scientists and a security detail. Zalia herself would have gone, but affairs of state kept her bound to Nexus Prime. Before the launch, the Empress visited Katie in her quarters. The human was packing the last of her equipment, her movements efficient and purposeful. You have done more for my empire in a few weeks than most advisors do in a lifetime. Zalia said I cannot express my gratitude adequately. Katie smiled. I'm just glad I could help. Vexmar deserves a chance at happiness, and the opportunity to study a wild dragon colony is beyond anything I could have dreamed of. Zalia hesitated, then removed a small amulet from around her neck. It was a teardrop-shaped crystal that glowed with an inner light. This is a royal sending stone. It will allow us to communicate across any distance. Keep it with you. The human accepted the gift with wide eyes. It's beautiful. It is also a symbol of imperial favor, Zalia added. No human has ever been granted such an honor, but you have earned it. The journey to Zeltar. 4 would take 17 days even at maximum speed. Zalia found herself checking the sending stone, frequently anxious for updates. Each night she would visit Vexmar, noting how the dragon seemed to sense that something important was happening. It watched the stars through the cavern skylight with renewed interest. On the 12th day, the sending stone activated, projecting a small hologram of Katie. Her face flushed with excitement. Your Majesty, we found them. The colony is real. There are 23 dragons living in the volcanic caverns of the outer moon. They appear to be thriving, though they're cautious of our presence. Zalia's hearts raced with anticipation. Have you been able to approach them? Not yet, Katie replied. We set up observation posts at a safe distance. The lead xenobiologist thinks they have a complex social hierarchy. We're trying to identify the alpha before making contact. Zalia nodded approval. That is wise. Dragons respect strength and authority above all. Rushing in without understanding their social structure could be disastrous. Keep me informed of any developments. For the next 3 days, Zalia received regular updates. The research team had identified what appeared to be the colony leader, an ancient female with silvery scales and wingspan nearly twice that of Vexmar. They had also observed several younger dragons who seemed to be without mates, perfect candidates for potential relocation. On the 15th day, the Ida sending stone remained silent. Zalia waited anxiously, checking it every hour, but no signal came. By nightfall, her worry had grown into genuine fear. She summoned her military advisor. Prepare my personal shuttle. I will be going to Zeltar 4 immediately. Your Majesty, the advisor protested. The Empire needs you here. The succession treaties with the Andromeda Alliance must be signed within the week. Zalia fixed him with a cold stare. Find another representative. My human is missing. The journey to Zeltar 4 took 5 days in the Empress' personal yacht, the fastest vessel in the Imperial fleet. Zalia spent the time alternating between meditation and reviewing the data Katie's team had sent before communications went silent. The last report mentioned an unusual seismic activity near the dragon colony. When they arrived at the outer moon, Zalia's worst fears were confirmed. The research vessel was there, but it had landed awkwardly on a rocky plateau near the main volcano. Multiple hull breaches were visible and emergency beacons flashed weakly in the thin atmosphere. The Imperial shuttle landed nearby and Zalia disembarked wearing an environmental suit. Her guards tried to stop her, insisting on securing the area first, but she pushed past them. Her 4 arms each carrying different scanning devices, she approached the damaged ship. Life signs were faint but present. She found 3 crew members in the main cabin, injured but alive. The ship's pilot explained what had happened. It was a moonquake. Your Majesty. The entire southern hemisphere of the moon experienced massive seismic activity. The volcano where the dragons lived began to erupt. Ambassador Miller and the science team were in the observation post at the base of the mountain. They activated emergency beacons, but then we lost contact. The dragons, they all flew away except what Zalia demanded. 1 dragon stayed behind, much smaller than the others. Greenscale's Ambassador Miller had been observing it, specifically said it reminded her of Vexmar. Zalia's heart skipped a beat. A relative, perhaps, or a potential mate. She ordered her guards to prepare for a rescue mission. The environmental suits would protect them from the toxic atmosphere, but the unstable terrain and volcanic activity posed significant dangers. They took hover sleds to the volcano following the emergency beacon signals. The landscape was apocalyptic. Rivers of lava cut through black stone fields, creating a maze of deadly barriers. The air was filled with ash and sulfur compounds, making visibility poor, even with enhanced optics. The beacon led them to a collapsed cave entrance. Scanning equipment detected 5 life forms inside human and 1 much larger heat signature. The entrance was blocked by fallen rock, some as large as small ships. We need to clear this carefully, the guard captain said. If we destabilize the wrong boulder, the entire structure could collapse. Zalia surveyed the situation with growing despair. It would take hours to safely clear the entrance, hours that Katie and her team might not have. Then she noticed something strange about the pattern of the rocks. They weren't randomly fallen, but seemed to have been deliberately arranged. This is a dragon's barrier. She realized they use them to protect their nests and treasures. The patterns allow for hidden access if you know how to read them. She studied the configuration, looking for the keystone that would unlock the passage. There against the eastern wall, a perfectly spherical boulder that seemed to defy gravity in its placement. Zalia approached it carefully, placing all 4 palms against its surface and pushing in a specific rhythm that matched the imperial dragon's heartbeat. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like distant thunder, the boulder began to roll, revealing a narrow passage just wide enough for a Zothari to crawl through. "I will go alone," Zalia declared. "It is too dangerous for a group, Your Majesty," the captain protested, but fell silent at her imperial glare. The passage twisted downward into darkness. Zalia's bioluminescent skin provided the only light as she navigated the tight confines. Eventually, the tunnel opened into a larger cavern. The air here was breathable, though hot and sulfurous. She removed her helmet and called out, "Katie. Are you here?" A weak voice responded from deeper in the cave. "Empress Zalia." Following the sound, Zalia found the human team huddled in a small alcove. 4 scientists and Katie. They were dirty, exhausted, and had minor injuries but were otherwise unharmed. More surprising was the large green dragon curled protectively around them. Its scales shimmered in the dim light, an exact match for Vexmar's "It saved us." Katie explained, her voice filled with wonder. "When the quake hit, we were trapped. The other dragons fled, but this one stayed. It guided us here and then sealed the entrance to protect us from the lava flows I think it's been waiting for." Rescue Zalia approached the dragon. Cautiously, it watched her with intelligent eyes so similar to her beloved pet. "Is it Vexmar's sister, I believe?" Katie said. "They have identical scale patterns along their spines. We were documenting the colony when I noticed her. The genetic markers must be nearly identical." The dragon chirped a sound Zalia recognized as a greeting. She responded with a traditional imperial whistle. The creature tilted its head, then slowly approached, lowering its massive snout to the Empress level. "They share a telepathic bond," Katie explained, in awe. "That's why she recognized you. She can sense her brother through your connection to him." Zalia reached out, touching the dragon's snout gently. The scales were warm and vibrant with life, so different from Vexmar's faded appearance. "Would you be willing to come with us?" she asked silently, projecting images of Nexus Prime and the Imperial Palace. The dragon blinked its 6 eyes in sequence, an affirmative response in draconic communication. "We should leave quickly," Katie said, gathering her equipment. "The volcano is becoming more active by the hour." The rest of the colony fled to the northern hemisphere, but this area is becoming increasingly unstable. With the dragon leading the way, they found a larger exit tunnel that opened onto a plateau above. The lava flows. The Imperial shuttle was redirected to their location, and soon they were all aboard, headed back to the safety of Zalia's yacht. The journey back to Nexus Prime was filled with anticipation. Katie spent hours with the female dragon, whom she'd named Terra after an ancient Earth goddess. The scientist documented everything from the creature's feeding habits to its sleep patterns and telepathic abilities. "This is revolutionary, Your Majesty," Katie explained as they shared a meal in the Empress private dining chamber. "We never understood why dragons were so rare. It seems their reproductive cycle is tied to specific environmental factors. The volcanic activity on Zeltar 4 was actually the beginning of their mating season." Xalia considered this information with growing excitement. "So Terra and Vexmar should be perfectly compatible." "Yes, and based on their genetic markers, they are distant enough relatives that breeding would strengthen rather than weaken the species." The Empress felt a surge of hope for the first time in months. "We must prepare for their introduction carefully. Dragons can be territorial, especially males." Katie nodded, already making notes on her datapad. "I'll prepare a proper protocol based on what we observed in the colony. The initial meeting should take place in neutral territory, perhaps the Royal Gardens rather than Vexmar's cavern." When they finally arrived at Nexus Prime, the entire Imperial court had gathered to witness the dragon's arrival. Terra stepped onto alien soil with regal grace, her head held high as she surveyed her new surroundings. She showed no fear, only curiosity as she examined the strange plants and architecture. The Imperial zoologists approached with offerings of rare meats and precious stones, traditional gifts for a dragon visitor. But Terra ignored them, her attention fixed on a distant point, as if listening to a voice only she could hear. "She's sensing," Vexmar Xalia realized. "He knows she's here." As if in confirmation, a loud roar echoed across the palace grounds. Moments later, a green blur shot into the sky. Vexmar had left his cavern for the first time in months and was flying toward them with incredible speed. The court erupted in panic, guards rushing to protect the Empress from what they perceived as a dragon gone wild. But Xalia waved them back, standing calmly beside Katie as Vexmar descended his wings, creating gusts of wind that bent the ornamental trees. The male dragon landed with surprising delicacy, his previously dull scales now glowing with renewed vitality. He approached Terra, slowly circling her in an elaborate display of strength and health. She watched him with what could only be described as draconic amusement, before responding with her own series of movements, a dance as old as their species. "They communicate through movement as much as telepathy," Katie whispered to Xalia. "They're establishing a connection." The two dragons continued their ritual for nearly an hour before touching snouts in a gesture of acceptance. The gathered court erupted in cheers and applause. The Imperial dragon had found a mate. The dynasty would continue that night. For the first time in months, the palace was filled not with mournful cries, but with the harmonious singing of two dragons, their voices twining together in an ancient melody that resonated with the very stones of the Imperial city. Xalia found Katie on a balcony overlooking the royal gardens where Vexmar and Terra were resting together. "Beneath the light of the 3 moons, you have done the impossible," the Empress said, joining the human at the railing. "You have saved my beloved companion, discovered a lost colony of his kind, and secured the future of dragons in the Confederation." Katie smiled, watching the peaceful scene below. "I only followed the evidence and listened to what Vexmar was trying to tell us. Sometimes the solution to a problem isn't technological or magical. It's simply understanding what a being needs." Xalia studied the human with new appreciation. Most species in the galaxy prided themselves on their technological achievements or military might, but humans seem to possess something far more valuable: empathy. The ability to understand and connect with other life forms on a fundamental level. "I wish to make you an offer," Xalia said finally. Ambassador is too limited a title for what you have accomplished. I would like to appoint you as Imperial Dragon Keeper, the first in 300 years. You would oversee not only Vexmar and Terra, but also the establishment of a new dragon sanctuary here on Nexus Prime. We could bring more dragons from Zeltar 4, create a thriving colony under Imperial protection. Katie looked stunned. Your Majesty, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Zelia, encouraged. You have a gift for understanding these creatures, and the Confederation could benefit greatly from further human insight. The human considered the offer, her eyes filled with wonder. It would mean leaving Earth behind perhaps for years, but the opportunity to work with such magnificent creatures to help establish a conservation program for a species on the brink of extinction, I would be honored, Your Majesty. Katie replied. Over the following months, Katie's appointment as Imperial Dragon Keeper sent ripples throughout the Confederation. Most species had viewed humans as primitive newcomers to the galactic stage, but now they were being re-evaluated as beings of extraordinary empathy and problem-solving abilities under Katie's guidance. 3 more dragons were carefully relocated from Zeltar 4 to the newly established sanctuary on Nexus Prime. A massive habitat was constructed, mimicking the volcanic environment they preferred while providing safety from the elements. The dragons adapted quickly, forming a small but stable community. Vexmar and Terra became the pride of the Empire. Their first clutch of eggs, 5 perfect spheres of translucent crystal nestled in a bed of heated stones, was celebrated with a month-long festival. The future of dragons in the Confederation was secure. Word of the human accomplishment spread to even the most distant worlds. Soon other species were requesting human advisors for their own ecological challenges. The diplomatic corps expanded rapidly. Struggling to keep up with demand, Earth suddenly found itself at the center of galactic politics, not through military might or technological superiority, but through the unique human capacity for understanding other species. For Zalia, the success went beyond politics. Each morning she would visit the dragon sanctuary, watching as Katie worked with the magnificent creatures. The human had developed a system of communication that combined verbal cues, telepathic impressions, and body language, allowing for complex exchanges of information. The dragons responded to her as they would to one of their own, a phenomenon never before documented. 1 year after Terra's arrival, Zalia made an unprecedented decision. During a full gathering of the Confederate Council with representatives from all 17,000 worlds, she proposed elevating Earth to the status of senior member, bypassing the traditional centuries-long process of gradual integration. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some representatives argued that humans were too new to the galactic stage. Others feared that giving them such status would disrupt the delicate balance of power. But Zalia stood firm. The humans have demonstrated qualities we desperately need. She declared they see connections where we see only differences. They understand emotions when we focus only on logic. Their perspective is invaluable not despite their youth but because of it. Their fresh eyes help us see beyond our ancient assumptions. Vote was close, but ultimately Earth was granted senior member status. The fastest ascension in Confederate history. Human diplomatic missions expanded to every corner of the galaxy, their unique insights helping to resolve conflicts that had persisted for generations. For Katie, the elevation of Earth meant new resources for her dragon conservation program. The sanctuary expanded to include habitats for other endangered species from across the galaxy, becoming a center for xenozoological research and conservation. She trained a team of human and alien specialists, all learning the methods she'd pioneered with Vexmar 5 years after her initial appointment. Katie stood with Zalia on the Imperial balcony, watching as dozens of dragons soared through the skies of Nexus Prime. Their scales shimmered like living rainbows in the light of the 3 moons. Among them was Vexmar, now fully grown and majestic, flanked by his mate and their 3 offspring. Who could have imagined this would be the result of a dragon's tears? Zalia mused. Katie smiled. I think about that often, Your Majesty. How one creature's suffering led to the salvation of an entire species and changed the course of human history in the galaxy. The Empress turned to look at Her human friend now dressed in the formal robes of the Imperial Dragon Keeper emblazoned with the royal crest. It was not just the dragon's cry that changed everything. It was your response to it. Most would have heard only noise, but you heard a call for help. The night air was filled with the melodious sounds of dragons singing to one another, their voices creating harmonies that resonated with the very stones of the imperial city. Below in the palace courtyard, aliens from 100 worlds gathered to witness the spectacle, many experiencing the wonder of dragons for the first time. Sometimes the most unbelievable solutions come from the simplest understanding, Katie said, watching, as Vexmar led the aerial display. That all creatures, across the vast expanse of space, share similar needs for connection, companionship, and love. Zalia nodded in agreement, placing one of her 4 hands gently on the human shoulder. That is the gift your species has brought to the stars, and why the galaxy will never be the same. The dragon that once cried every night now soared joyfully under the 3 moons of Nexus Prime, leading his growing family in complex aerial maneuvers. A living symbol of what humanity could offer to the stars. Not conquest or domination, but understanding, empathy, and the simple recognition that all sentient beings, no matter how alien, shared the same fundamental needs. And as human influence spread throughout the Confederation, bringing with it new perspectives and fresh solutions to ancient problems, the stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the galaxy itself welcomed this strange new species with their remarkable gift for understanding the heart of every creature, no matter how different they might appear.